Well, Ghana is being touted as one of the best fledgling democracies in Africa. We have had, since 1992, about 6 elections. We have had turnovers of political parties coming into power. And if these are anything to go by, then we would say that Ghana is a good democracy. But hey, stop there and halt and look back. What I think democracy is not the presence of a constitution, institutions of state, frequent elections, and then we say Ghana is a democracy, or any other country is a democracy. If you see the reverses in democratic dispensations in Africa, then we need to be circumspect in our trying to judge democracies in Africa. In the first place, I have always said, and I've written a lot on that democracy is nothing without good governance. And I separate the two. I do separate the two because oftentimes democracy has been equated to the presence of a constitution, the social contract, the institutions of state governance, freedoms, political freedoms, economic freedoms, etc. And when you do this, when you just measure democracy in terms of these parameters, you are wrong. Because good governance include these things that we've mentioned as democratic credentials, plus prudence in economic governance. First and foremost, imprudence in economic governance brings about all kinds of macroeconomic instability, higher inflation, deficit, budget deficit, foreign exchange deficit, and if you have all the balance of payment disequilibria, if you have all these things in your economy, then you are being imprudent. Number two, politics has been so monetized in such a way that how we elect our people is no longer the type of democratic representation that we're talking about. Right? The third thing is when the mass of the people are gullible, and therefore politics is propaganda, not politics. So that if you did a kilometer of road, you tell us that you've done 10 kilometers, and the population just parroting this thing. The government is doing well because they've done 10 kilometers, when it is pure propaganda. For me, this is not good governance. So, whilst we are praising Ghana for democratic credentials, I want any other observer to watch the following. How is politics played? How are people represented? How are the masses understanding the political process in such a way that that is the only way they want and not to derail it? I say this also because at any point in time, there can be any innocuous trigger to derail everything. There can be an innocuous thing that will derail it because the people are fed up with something. Politics is so monetized. Propaganda is too high, extremely high. And there is so much imprudence in economic governance. Imprudence in the sense that money is being wasted on unnecessary things because of the patronage system. And I say this because the two major political parties in Ghana seem to have accepted the patronage system to the extent that each one wants to maintain the status quo. And that is dangerous. It's extremely dangerous. It's like, because of the patronage system, we want to be in power by all means. Democracy is essential and good and strengthened when you consolidate it. And consolidation of democracy means that people have a belief that democracy is a process, not an event. In our current situation, we've made democracy an event where all you need is to get to to breast the tape. And so all means possible to breast the tape is done. And that is pay the money, use propaganda, do everything, and get on to it. You win power and you call the shots. I'm afraid about democracy in Ghana.
I wonder if you gave me the top 3 or 4 elements of good governance, what would they be?
There would be basic democratic tenets: a constitution, separation of powers, frequent elections, freedoms. That's number 1. Number 2, prudence in economic governance. Number 3, transparency and accountability where the people are part. These are the 3 basic things I would say form the basis of good governance.
Now, could you fall back into your role as professor and rate Ghana A to D to F on each of those?
To be honest, I would say Ghana has A in terms of the first one, democracy and the basic structures for democracy. On the second one, I would grade Ghana about F. And on the third, the same. And I'm forthright in what I'm saying because, look, on the B, prudence in economic governance, there's so much wastage. We are told that we have expended almost everything in our coffers. We are told that all the MMDAs, that's the municipal, what do you call it? MDAs, that is the district assemblies and the municipal assemblies,
right,
all have overspent their budget. And the ministries have all overspent their. How did that happen if we have transparency and accountability? And nobody's talking about it. Somebody should go to prison by now if we have democracy. But that's not happening. And again, money is a profligacy is the order of the day. These are scary moments and makes our democracy fragile. The final one, and which is more scary, is the very fact that because of the patronage system, institutions of state that are good under the first rubric, that's A, the democracy, are now being belted under the hypnosis of governance. I mean, the governance system. It's like the police are working only to see what will the government say. They look at over the shoulders before they work. The military. All institutions of state are now becoming party institutions. It's scary. We got to talk about that. We as a nation, if we want to consolidate our democracy, should be forthright and say, hey, look, this is wrong. Because when the police start working this way, when crime begin to get political colors, where are we going?
What controls can government put in place given the reality of the centrality of the presidency in democracy in Ghana?
Leadership. Nothing, no amount of legislation will put anything because people do it and the party covers them. And so what we need is a leader who says that enough is enough. Let's turn a new leaf like Zedillo did in Mexico. Can we now respect our institutions of state, institutions that are working outside party? If we did this, what will happen is that institutions of state that are built by the constitution to be to ensure accountability and transparency will then work without recourse to the party. That's the only one-stop shop that leadership changes course. Finished. But people talk about legislation. People talk. If you legislate and the institution is under the government, I mean, come on. So I want to see a leader who says enough is enough. No more overspending. No more profligacy. I mean, the institutions of state, IOCO, DNI, police will work without me. You know, when you hear of some kind of you know, anything that is negative, anything that is criminal, please go ahead. Even if it is a government official, if a leader does this once, we had a situation during Rawlings' time when there was no democracy and when people feared to do anything wrong. But when his own people started doing wrongs and they were not attacked, that's how everything started deteriorating. And so we need a leader, not necessarily a despot. No. A leader using democratic tendencies to be able to curb where we're going because we are close to the tipping point.
A couple of days ago, there was a series of 2 articles on reform, constitutional reform, the sharing of power that's concentrated in the hands of the president now more broadly across the government. First of all, do you subscribe to that point as an approach, although you argue that you really just need good execution of what you've got now? Exactly. Do you subscribe to that point as a necessary constitutional reform of a growing democracy that Ghana is?
A growing democracy in a place where people are just too gullible, where the system is patronized, or a patronized system, where the system is monetized, will not subscribe to what you are describing. We want, and what we have is enough to really bring democracy. So 2 ways about that. But it's like whoever is in governance is interpreting the democratic tenets or using the democratic things that we have in Ghana to his advantage. That's all. But if we got a leader who allows state institutions to work independently, who would himself subject himself to the scrutiny of the people, because there is political participation in Ghana, but skewed. When they say participation, people vote for their own people and that kind of thing. But the people have to pay. It's bribery. Our MPs are people who have spent huge sums of money to get where they are. So when they go there, all they have to do is to recoup the money. Clearly. So I wouldn't subscribe to anything say that whittle away the powers of the president. No, the president must use his powers more productively to see change and not to think about the next election and therefore let things loose. And therefore his people become, how do I call them? I mean, hounds who hound down any other person who is in opposition. I mean, that's wrong. If this president or any other president sits back, if it is the police, allow them their parameter. If it is the whatever Yoko, that is our it's like our FBI, let them work. Let them work outside. If it's a government official who is doing something, they know. And I doubt if our BNI doesn't know what is happening in the cupboards of any other person in Ghana. So the strength of the president, as per our constitution, is positive. But if it is being misused, misapplied, you know, if that strength is in a leader who wants to consolidate democracy in Ghana, I tell you, we'll go places.
Yeah. So you don't think that the weakening of the presidency, a strong presidency, is the way to continue to pursue democracy?
Absolutely not.
You probably follow, since you follow world affairs as much as you follow things going on here in Ghana, President Obama had a very bad week a couple of weeks ago in the United States. Right. Could the president of Ghana ever have a bad week like that, where the IRS problems are going, the internal revenue problems and the other issues that he was faced with, all of them seem to come in? Can a president here in Ghana have that kind of scrutiny and have to be accountable, come before the camera and said, I'm going to get into this, I'm going to look into this, I'm going to get to the bottom of this, and those responsible will be fired?
Our presidents do get into more trouble than the Obamas. You have a situation where a lot of things come, a cluster of problems. For example, there is something like Danso, that is electricity, which is not stable, water, not there, some scandals, fires gutting places left and right, all at once. And the president finds himself in a tight corner, unable to explain.
So he's held accountable. They do hold the president accountable.
I'm coming up to that. Yeah. What happens is that when many people, and you have this talk shows and everybody insulting, and in Ghana, you see, we have gotten to a point where there is so much indiscipline. So people could insult the president right in the face. And therefore, the president becomes a little uncomfortable. And he comes out from time to time. There was a time he himself told us that we have overspent our budget. It shows the corner in which he was then. And often he has come again to talk about this electricity failures and whatnot. He's come out to talk about a whole lot of things that are not going on right. Roads that have been left unkept and that kind of thing. So they come into that. But unlike the Obamas, who are scrutinized fully and at times they have their back to the wall, our presidents over here, they come out, say something, and the party machinery is put into place for propaganda. And at times blame is put on the opposition to kill the case. So unlike the Obamas, our presidents over here have a leeway of going about it and in a nonchalant way. All right? Okay, we say we'll fix it. So shut up, kind of.
Let's talk more about the region now and West Africa, and how do you see democracy going there? I'm assuming that you are of the opinion that in spite of all of your observations, maybe I should ask you the question, in your region, what is the best working democracy?
Well, you would say Ghana, but we need to be watching Sierra Leone coming up. We need to be watching Sierra Leone. The post-war situation is such that now they have realized that, look, governance must be governance. Politicking. And you know, I like the president. People are asking him, "Oh, stay on. You've done so well." The usual thing in Africa. He said no, and he's putting the real, pillars of democracy there in Sierra Leone. And I believe Sierra Leone is a country to watch in future if we don't get other persons who would come the way Ghana is going and that kind of, because we started also very well, but on and on, you know, we were slipping back into days of non-democracy or non-good governance and that kind of thing. So I would say Sierra Leone is doing well. Liberia is still hiccuping a lot because of the situation that brought Sirleaf Johnson in, and the clouds surrounding her, and the bitterness of the followers of the footballer, kind of. We need to be very careful about Liberia. I don't think Liberia is doing better than Sierra Leone, even though Sierra Leone was worse than the Liberian situation. I don't know, but I think Ivory Coast needs to hurdle the scars quickly. Unfortunately, Ivory Coast has a similar problem like Ghana. Politicization of the governance system, tribalization of the governance system, and therefore, in totality, I would say that democracy is hiccuping very badly in West Africa. Hiccuping very badly because of the patronage system, because of the use of the tribal card. It's extremely dangerous. There was a time I gave a paper in Ghana and I told them that I do not care who rules, I care how you rule. And so we had a presidential candidate who came on air to insult me about all those things, and I gave it back to him. And I told him, I'm not going to vote for him. That doesn't mean I'm leaving the party. Because when I look at the presidential candidates, there are better ones whom I think would rule better. So I wouldn't care who as such, but I see who can really do the job. And if he's not doing the job, I will withdraw my support. And I think in West Africa, we haven't gotten to that. Look at Britain, the near kind of hung kind of parliament and whatever it is, the crisis. But it's like the British people just really saw that, okay, there is a mechanism for putting the prime minister there. If we have such a situation, they put Cameron there, and who cares whether it is Cameron or somebody else. What Cameron is coming to do is what worries the British people. And they demand X, Y. Now, what is on the table is Europe. Where do we belong in Europe? And everybody is debating it. So the point I'm trying to say is this, that in West Africa, we need a new crop of leadership, which would use the tribal system that we have positively to unite us, not to divide us. Because the many hotspots that we have in West Africa or generally in Africa is because one tribe is used against the other where politics is concerned. Let me shift on to Kenya, for example. The Kenyan example is clear. The Kikuyus are about 33% of the population. The Meru and Embu is about 3-4%. But the Kalenjins are 12%, Arab Moist tribe. So the Kikuyus have been able to marry these tribes to themselves, not actual marriage. Like, oh, don't you see we are friends politically? And using the tenets of democracy, that's why I say democracy is different from good governance. The Kikuyus have always tried to get the 50+1 that we are looking for in a democracy.
By any means?
By any means. So you use the tribes, and so the Luos, who are about 30%, a large tribe, will never come to power by using the same democratic tenets. Oh, the British are clapping for it because we won 50% plus 1%. And that was what was going on. You know, and in Ghana it's the same thing. We have a tribe, less populous, and they vote en masse. Because once upon a time, a leader of Ghana who ruled for so long a time, 19 years, came from that tribe. And that is the base of one party. Now they try to move throughout the country where our first president did so well in unionizing us through the tribe. So there are several of such minor tribes all over the country. And wherever they are, they will vote for that party.
But didn't Nkrumah try very hard to bring Ghana along and rise above tribalism?
Thank you. That's exactly what I've referred to. That Nkrumah did so well to detribalize Ghana. So many tribes moved into several areas. And as I'm saying, the Ebe tribe, for example, which vote for one party no matter what, most of them, they are all over the country. And so you might see that votes are coming from this part of the, and that is to the plastic ingenuity of Nkrumah. The tribe was not known to the extent that people who came from another tribe represented another tribe in parliament, and there are several of them. J.A. Mensah, for example, you know, he didn't come from where he was. He stood as a parliamentary candidate. Nkrumah himself, Accra. And that was the beauty of democracy. We reached a point in this country where a certain tribe said that if you didn't come from this part of our land, we won't allow you to vote. And the people were maimed and you know, that kind of thing. So The parties themselves, when they are canvassing for votes, use the tribe instead of.
But I want to go back to something you said. You said you can look at tribalism as a positive force in a society.
Yes.
I suspect that that's what we would call or use under the rubric of diversity.
That's right.
How do you make that transition? Nkrumah obviously tried. Mozambique, they tried in their constitution when Frelimo came to power. They tried to move tribe. How do you make the transition? There was a conference in 2012 in Botswana on democracy and diversity.
That's right.
I don't know if you were in attendance.
I didn't attend.
But you probably followed it.
That's right.
But I didn't see much on the diversity thing.
That's right.
How does Africa bring tribalism to a positive force called diversity?
Very easy. Nkrumah did it. First and foremost, when the British were colonizing us, on every form you filled for any employment or for school and that kind of thing, there was the tribe there. Hometown tribe, that kind of thing. Nkrumah removed it. Our tribe is Ghana. So there's no form you filled in the past where your tribe. And at times on the colonial form they have native of. So we are natives of Ghana. Finished. Nkrumah did that, the first thing. The second thing he did was the boardinization of schools. Boardinization. That schools were proper schools, housed the pupils or the students, and they interacted more. Even today in our country, those remnants are there. People quarrel on the basis of schools, not on the basis of tribes. Which school did you attend? I attended Infantipim. Then Adisade will tell you, but Infantipim is a school, mine is a college. And they meet often, to see Infantipim. And in Infantipim or Adisade or Accra Training College, you will meet all the tribes. And they love each other and they competed among themselves. Schools competition were very high. Whether it's singing, choir system, or football, or sports, or any other kind of thing. And we felt ourselves as Ghanaians. The third thing he did was civil service. You never stayed at a place for more than 4 years. 3 years is enough, you are transferred to a place. So there was high intermarriage. Young man of about 24, 25, you transfer him to a place. Another 3 years he's going to a place. Teachers were not, where you came from, you don't teach there. And gradually Ghana became Ghana. And we loved each other, not where you came from, but maybe the club where you are. I mean, you are teaching in a certain town and the townsfolk.
And you see a reversal of that?
Come again?
Do you see a reversal of that? A deterioration?
Great.
Yes.
Great reversal.
Really? Great
reversal. We started a process called deboardinization. Because the World Bank told us that it's called. Yes. We even the universities, we are now bringing it back. In the 80s, we had many more students and only a third of them were on campus. Now we have come back to a situation where we want to house almost all, we have 34,000 students now, and we house about 28,000 of them. Yes. But in the past, only about 10,000 of them were housed and the rest came from home. And they had to hire places left and right. It's difficult. But there was a big reversal, and there's no way we can go back to Nkrumah's days. Because
so they're losing connection then? But
they're losing connection,
yes. This is a sort of an isolated community.
Exactly. And then schools, because of the deboardinization, you have them in enclaves. If it is Ewe land, only Ewes are there. And what happens most is that even in some basic schools, we are being told they must learn the local language. And what happens is that, yes. There's where there are borderlines, for example, my father's hometown, Enum borders the Ewe land. So what happens is that there are some schools in the border areas, most of the teachers are Ewes, and they want to teach Ewe, and my people don't want it. So there are skirmishes of bad blood between the two tribes and that kind of thing. So we're going back. Yes.
President Danso, I do want to go back to West Africa again, yes. and your comments on Sierra Leone and Liberia.
Yes.
The war in Sierra Leone was obviously advanced significantly and horrific ways by Charles Taylor.
Right.
The war in Liberia also had the same. Yes, it was Charles Taylor also. Yet Charles Taylor is in jail in The Hague for crimes in Sierra Leone, and no one has been punished for crimes in Liberia. Could you reflect on that a bit, sir?
I strongly suspect that that was very wrong. And Charles Taylor's incarceration is good, no two ways about it. But all those involved, and that is when we say the victor's justice, it may live to bounce back. Conflict is such that it doesn't die if you don't kill it. And so a generation 2, 3, 4 to come, somebody will rake this up. It happened in Kosovo. The Kosovo problem started in 1389. Who is alive? But because it wasn't killed, it came back in the First World War, it came back in the Second World War, then it came back after the post-Cold War situation. So that the Liberian situation has not been really tackled. And I believe the way they have handled Sirleaf Johnson's case is not correct. I mean, there is evidence to the fact that she patronized Charles Taylor. And if that is so, she must also have been indicted. Or if she has apologized, actually.
It's a 1,300-page piece and,
yes.
and reconciliation.
And I know about that. And several other persons who took part in this kind of carnage, who are working about.
Prince Johnson.
He turned himself into...
He's in the Senate.
He's a senator and a pastor. Mm-hmm. He doesn't care what he did. And I believe if all these people were indicted, it would have brought some kind of soul-searching kind of thing in Liberia. But unfortunately, at times, the way we go about bringing about so-called peace is not the absence of war, actually. It's a little debilitating. Syria, whatever it is, we want to see some group really incarcerated, and we think that is the end of everything. But that's wrong. I think there are many people in Sierra Leone and Liberia who also need some kind of indictment. But I think the international community thought Charles Taylor was the main, the others could be dealt with internally. But that's not working. It cannot. Because if we started anything right now in Sierra Leone or Liberia, you're going to reignite the whole process.
And that's precisely my point, Professor Danso, and that is how tenuous is democracy in, particularly in Liberia. I'm interested in your point on Sierra Leone, that it's probably got a stronger foundation.
Right.
But if the blue hats of the United Nations were to leave Liberia tomorrow, what do you think would happen?
I strongly suspect that a lot of problems would come up there. The cementing of democracy in Liberia is not going the way. In fact, we were more interested in the security sector reforms, but not any pacifist kind of way of trying to bring the Liberians together. The counties are still looking at each other with animosity. It's clear. Yes. And if the blue helmets leave without having cemented the principles of democracy and good governance, I don't think we're going to see Liberia heading forward. And again, I think it's a pointer to the fact that it's not good. I've written a few articles about that. As I said, democracy is a process, not an event. And therefore, when the West, especially, there is a problem in any area in Africa or the world, what they want to see is a rush to the ballot box, and we say democracy. It's wrong. Liberia needs a few decades of tutelage. And I wouldn't mind if we reinvented the trusteeship council. Seriously. So that people, we are now in a global village. So if there are good technocrats which can be taken to that country which is in turmoil to help build the country, it's just like peacekeeping. You bring in these soldiers to come and keep the peace. Why can't we bring technocrats to come and help build the place for a decade, two, whatever it is? Cement the principles of democracy, put the people together by some programs before we let them go for their own elections and things like that. We rush Liberia again into democracy. We rush Sierra Leone, but the Sierra Leone one, let me be honest, the 10,000 British troops did a lot, and they stayed longer than
even. I have to ask you this question: how big a threat is corruption to democracy?
It is the biggest ever threat to democracy.
Is it?
I have always said it. Corruption is the biggest ever threat. Look, if a system is corrupt, nobody thinks about the state. And when nobody thinks about the state, nothing goes on, even up to the courts. If corruption is rife in a country, people can buy their way through everything. And so the system doesn't work. And if corruption is in the country, there is another big problem. The bigger problem is that government doesn't have money. People have money. So nothing goes on. And then corruption brings indiscipline. If a population is indisciplined, you can count it. We go nowhere. So for me, for all that we are doing, and most of the corruption comes from our so-called, the people who praise us. Today in this country, foreigners bribe their way through everything. How come the Chinese are in this country so much and they are, digging everywhere? It's because people in authority brought them. The rumor is that MPs and ministers go for the concessions, they go to China, buy the equipment, bring the Chinese, come dig and get gold for me. That's corruption. And our rivers are corrupted too. It's like the rivers go, colored, and people get diseases. So corruption is, I take corruption as a virus in a computer. It destroys everything.